Thank you, Reverend Nagasaki, Your Excellency Ambassador Kawamura. I was very moved by the singing earlier because it reminded me of the preciousness of every life. My mother's last words to me before she passed away, she was 96 when she passed away. She said, "Thank you, I love you, wow." And we all shared that. So, arigato, I love you. I was also thinking, when the children were singing, of the thousands of innocent children who lost their precious lives in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Of course, every life is precious at any age, but just the children, the massive number of children. And when you think about it, it has to be a call to action to prevent such horror from ever being repeated. So let all of us who have reflected on this tragedy tonight carry the full measure of responsibility to work to achieve a world without nuclear weapons. It's humbling to address the magnitude of these events. The devices that devastated Hiroshima and Nagasaki put before humanity a choice that it never had before. Every generation hence must decide whether it will be the last. Should this decision even be in anyone's hands, no less a few men and women, no more gifted or wise than any of us? George Kennan, the distinguished American diplomat who originated the Cold War containment policy toward the Soviet Union, stated, "The readiness to use nuclear weapons against other human beings, against people we do not know, whom we've never seen, and whose guilt or innocence is not for us to establish, and in doing so to place in jeopardy the natural structure upon which all civilization rests, as though the safety and perceived interests of our own generation were more important than everything that has taken place or could take place in civilization. This is nothing less than a presumption, a blasphemy, an indignity of monstrous proportions offered to God." Albert Einstein, reflecting on this, said, "The unleashing power of the atom bomb has changed everything except our mode of thinking, and thus we head toward unparalleled catastrophe. It is vision that changes modes of thinking, but vision must be clear and strong. Clarity is crucial. If we have no where to go, we will go nowhere. Action without purpose is traveling without a destination. Vision is the catalyst that can awaken our better self to action." The recent treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons, the so-called ban treaty, issues such a call, and for that reason it should be supported. But there's much work to be done now before we get to that treaty's entry into force. There are already commitments pursuant to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty that 191 countries have made, including the 5 nuclear weapon states that include a test ban treaty. It must be brought into force. A fissile material cutoff treaty, stopping the production of any more nuclear fissile material. Strengthening the international atomic energy capacity of safeguards. Lowering the operational status of the weapons, such as no first use pledges or negative security assurances against countries that have renounced nuclear weapons. And more important than anything, commencing negotiations on a convention eliminating nuclear weapons, which is a unanimous ruling of the International Court of Justice. These are steps that need to be taken now. But we need a vision, a powerful vision, to create the change that's necessary. And once released, a vision can change the world. In July 4th of 1776, a declaration was made. "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal." When it was stated, people without property, women, and people of color were not included in this equation. However, this vision contained a powerful seed that has blossomed into a tree of expanded liberty from the oppression of kings. And today, even hypocritical tyrants pay the price of hypocrisy when giving these principles lip service, while its compelling magnetism continues to drive the world toward greater justice and peace. On August 28, 1963, Martin Luther King reiterated that vision with his I Have a Dream speech and said, "One day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed, that all men are created equal." When you ponder that, you cannot use a nuclear weapon against innocent people because they are equal to you and their life is as precious as yours. He continued that speech and said, "I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation, live in a world, I would say today, where they will not be judged by the color of their skin or their religion or their gender or their beliefs, but by the content of their character." And we share, all of us here today, I know, share that dream, knowing that we are one human family. When Presidents Reagan and Gorbachev met in Geneva in 1985, they put in motion an enormous social change by stating clearly the need for cooperation to make the world safer and avoid nuclear war. In the statement they issued together, they said that they agreed that a nuclear war cannot be won and must never be fought. They said, recognizing that any conflict between the USSR and the US would have catastrophic consequences, they emphasized the importance of preventing any war between them, whether nuclear or conventional, and they agreed they would not seek to achieve military superiority. It was that vision of cooperation and that affirmation that a nuclear war cannot be won and therefore must never be fought that put in motion the end of the Cold War. Since that statement, the arsenals of Russia and the United States have gone from over 70,000 weapons to less than 15,000 today. That is not an insignificant accomplishment. But as I said earlier, much work needs to be done just to fulfill existing promises. Russia keeps asking now to reaffirm this principle that a nuclear war cannot be won and therefore must never be fought. And the current United States administration refuses to acknowledge that. This is simply outrageous. In fact, it's worse than that. I think it's insane. Despite its being ignored by the public, the existing United States policy seems to contemplate the actual uses in war. The June 11th, 2019 statement by the Joint Chiefs of Staff of the U.S. military states in relevant part, and I quote, "Integration of nuclear weapons into a theater of operations requires the consideration of multiple variables. Using nuclear weapons could create conditions for decisive results and the restoration of strategic stability. Specifically, the use of a nuclear weapon will fundamentally change the scope of a battle and create conditions that affect how commanders will prevail in conflict." This is frightening language. To prevail in conflict means winning by using nuclear weapons. This is not an informal document. This is the formal policy of the U.S. military. This is a vision of the viable use of nuclear weapons, and I would say that's insane. General Lee Butler, who at one time was in charge of the targeting readiness and policy of the entire nuclear arsenal of the United States, one of the creators of the Single Integrated Operations Plan, said, and I quote, "Despite all the evidence, we've yet to fully grasp the monstrous effect of these weapons, that the consequences of their use defy reason, transcending time and space, poisoning the earth and deforming its inhabitants. They are inherently dangerous, hugely expensive, and militarily inefficient. Accepting nuclear weapons as the ultimate arbiter of conflict condemns the world to live under a dark cloud of perpetual anxiety. Worse, it codifies mankind's most murderous instincts as an acceptable resort when other options for resolving conflict fail. I've spent years studying nuclear weapons effects, have investigated a distressing array of accidents and incidents involving strategic weapons and forces, and I came away from that experience deeply troubled by what I see as the burden of building and maintaining nuclear arsenals, the grotesquely destructive war plans, the daily operational risks, and the constant prospect of a crisis that would hold the fate of entire societies at risk. The United States has just pledged approximately $1.7 trillion to modernize the arsenal, and it is stimulating a nuclear arms race, as is China, as is Russia, as is India, as is Pakistan. The horror of nuclear weapons' actual effects are illustrated in a quote from Stansfield Turner, the former director of the CIA, when he points out the fireball that a 1 megaton bomb would create is roughly within 8 to 9 tenths of a second, 3 times the heat and light of a comparable area of the sun. That's simply a destructive capacity beyond human imagination. And he continued, this flash of incredibly intense nuclear-driven sunlight could simultaneously set an uncountable number of fires over an area of close to 100 square miles. Martin Luther King, when he received the Nobel Prize in 1964, and we never hear this part of his speech when he received the prize, how much he dwelt on this issue. I'll quote some of the things that he said when he was in Oslo. I refuse to accept the cynical notion that nation after nation must spiral down a militaristic stairway into the hell of thermonuclear destruction. I believe that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word in reality. The day before he got the award, he gave another speech in which he said, recent events have vividly reminded us that nations are not reducing, but rather increasing their arsenals of weapons of mass destruction. Today we're not increasing the number, but we're modernizing them, making them more effective, more reliable, safer. That's the language they actually use. And he said, the best brains in the highly developed nations of the world are devoted to military technology. The proliferation of nuclear weapons is not halted. The fact that most of the time human beings put the truth about the nature and risks of the nuclear war out of their minds because it's too painful and therefore not acceptable does not alter the nature and risks of such a war. The device of rejection may temporarily cover up anxiety, but it does not bestow peace of mind and emotional security. In a day when vehicles hurtle through outer space and guided ballistic missiles carve highways of death through the stratosphere, no nation can claim a victory in war. A so-called limited war will leave little more than a calamitous legacy of human suffering, political turmoil, and spiritual disillusionment. A world war, God forbid, will leave only smoldering ashes as a mute testimony of a human race whose folly led inexorably to ultimate death. So if modern man continues to flirt unhesitatingly with war, he will transform his earthly habitat into an inferno such as even the mind of Dante could not imagine. I do not wish to minimize the complexity of addressing these problems that need to be faced in achieving disarmament and peace. But I think it is a fact that we shall not have the will, the courage, and the insight to deal with such matters unless in this field we are prepared to undergo a mental and spiritual reevaluation, a change of focus. He says it is not enough to say we must not wage war. It is necessary to love peace and sacrifice for it. We must see that peace represents a sweeter music, a cosmic melody that is far superior to the discords of war. Somehow we must transform the dynamics of the world power struggle from the negative nuclear arms race, which no one can win, to a positive contest to harness man's creative genius for the purpose of making peace and prosperity a reality for all the nations of the world. In short, we must shift the arms race into a peace race. If we have the will and determination to mount such a peace offensive, we will unlock hitherto tightly sealed doors of hope and transform our imminent cosmic elegy into a song of creative fulfillment. That's essentially what the Sustainable Development Goals are. They are a model of real security. They are a model of a transformative vision. And that vision has to be spread by us because it's not as exciting as the shiny things that the media and the fearful things of the media and the distracting and petty, pornographically trivial things that the media portrays. Martin Luther King points out in order to get to that world, we have to understand we've inherited a big house, a great world house in which we have to live together, black and white, Easterner, Westerner, Gentile, Jews, Catholics, Protestants, Muslims, and Hindus, a family unduly separated in ideas, culture, and interests, who, because We can never again live without each other. We must learn to live in this one big world, to live with each other in this house. This call for a worldwide fellowship that lifts neighborly concern beyond tribe, race, class, and nation is reality, a call for an all-embracing love for all. Let me close. These are my words now. Let me close by reminding us that our love must be brought into action that is effective. And that is why treaties, international law, values, vision, organizing, speaking out, demonstrating, and supporting the many devotees to peace will not allow us to hesitate, to bicker, or to sit still. This is the time in which the very foundations of social sanity, reason, debate, respect, civility, truth-telling, and peace are at risk as never before. Yes, we must reinforce the commitments of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty to obtain a nuclear weapons-free world, but we're seeing the very institutions of treaties themselves under threat. My goodness, the United States doesn't have a permanent representative to the UN. Have no doubt, today, your passion, your voice, your commitment is what will make the difference. May we have the courage to allow the blessings that have brought us here, the blessings that we know are real. There is a seed that contains a mystery of world peace wanting to be born. We know that the love that we share amongst ourselves is the water that will grow that seed. We know that the love that we have for the creation, this wondrous creation, as my political mentor, Senator Alan Cranston, used to say, in this vast universe, this may be the only place where love is practiced. We know that the love that we have for the creation brings us a sense of awe. We know that if we dedicate ourselves to selfless service and bring our pure sentiments into action, the universe will conspire to make ways even for that seed to break through the concrete of this modern world. That as these flowers sprout, the concrete will break more and more. Thus, we will learn a new technology, not the technology that is melting the polar ice cap, but the technology that can melt the human heart. May we receive that blessing that can melt our hearts and melt the hearts of others. And in that learning, a world without nuclear weapons will also be found. Thank you.
Thank you so much.